Welcome, dear listener, to Desert Island Gamer Campfire Tales, where I try and curb my stupid northern accent into something a little more mellow, where we spend long, starlit nights around the campfire glow, recounting those tales of epic endeavour and daring do, as woodland creatures and gods on high revel in our glorious escapades. Over-egged it a tad. Hang on. Long, light bulb lit nights around the TV's glow, spent drunk and a bit nauseous from a Dorito overindulgence, trying to remember that time the grenade we threw bounced off a wall and killed our whole team, as spouses, parents and kids took disapprovingly from the kitchen. Nailed it. The midnight launch and other bad ideas. As something of a fanboy for the noble art of playing games, and as someone with enough miles on the clock that my joints have begun to click where once they were oiled and fluid, it would be fair to presume that I have a relatively healthy weight of experience in said noblest of arts. And you would be correct in such a presumption. Over the years, I have devoted far too many hours, or perhaps just the right amount depending on your viewpoint, to games and their many varied shapes and sizes. Across this vast span of time and space, where I've lived countless lives, died in countless gruesome ways, tasted glory on the tumble of dice and defeat at the hands of lag, hackers, maybe glitches, but never, ever better skilled players, never, I have learned one very important lesson. You're never too old to make huge, soul-destroying mistakes that will haunt your dreams for years to come. Cut to Penzance, Cornwall, 11 PM, November 2010. Incessant drizzle falls from an inky black cloud-laden sky, and the wind bites through my unseasonal choice of jacket, as the words "you need layers" repeat on a loop in my head from one frozen ear to the other, and I groan inwardly. Hands buried so deep into pockets that I'm feeling lint from another age. I stand in a queue of 4. The couple in front look layered up for the weather, which does nothing to raise my depleted spirits. I have no idea who stands behind me beyond a vague knowledge that some presence is there. I dare not turn around to look for fear of meeting the eyes of whoever or whatever lurks there and being drawn into an awkward and stilted conversation. The night is still early and I have no desire to make a new acquaintance yet. To my right, the glaring light from the video game shop casts an unwelcome beam across our motley crew who have come to queue, and inside I can feel the continued build-up of regret. Deep, aching regret. On this fateful night of nights, 10th November 2010, Microsoft released the Kinect, and Softlad here thought what a great idea it would be to traverse the dark and snarling Cornish country lanes in clinging mist and gentle rain to attend the undoubted cacophony of joyous noise and utter delight that would await me in the shape of the Kinect midnight launch at the other end. I envisioned lights and music, a jittery crowd of eager Xbox gamers getting drenched in the excitement, and an air of expectancy so electric you could power the national grid from its essence alone. As I ascended the escalator towards my destination, the doubts had surfaced already. These were largely based upon the eerie silence that hung in the air, broken only by the gentle hum of the moving staircase. And then, as I alighted at the top, the sight that greeted me made my heart sink faster than all the anchors in the Penzance harbour. There was no music nor excitement, no electricity, no fanfares, no Kinect mascots, and pretty much nobody there. Well, save for the 2 Xbox gamers at the door, a couple it seemed already waiting. And they were getting drenched, but it was just the rain, and I was instantly convinced that it had already washed away any semblance of excitable activity to come. As I approached the scene, I felt sheepish to the point that I almost walked straight past. But I did actually want to get my mitts on a Kinect. I suppose this was my first mistake, and it had led directly to my second that now saw me dutifully taking my place in, well, I suppose my presence made it a queue. So the queue, and waiting and waiting. It's funny how time alters based upon the situation you find yourself in. The one I was in right now had it moving like it was in the Matrix. The rain fell slowly, defined drops, crystalline through the night sky. The clock hands idled along. The shuffle of feet behind me sounded laboured as they arrived. Just one pair of feet the entire time. I didn't look. and the temperature at the core of my body gently dropped with every drawn out minute, meaning the only thing that did gradually increase was the rate at which I was shivering. By the time the clock finally reached midnight, I was beyond caring. I was cold, miserable, and wet. And then I bought a Kinect. Jesus, what a night. The moment of purchase was as disappointing as the many moments of waiting, and then I quietly plodded back to the car, drove home and went to bed. My midnight launch experience at an end. The nightmares, however, would continue for some time to come. The one where I actually turned to greet the presents behind me in the queue is a particularly unpleasant one, but that is a story for another time. The root of the console wars. I am here today to hang my head in shame and admit to being a veteran of one of the most pointlessly futile and deeply embarrassing wars ever waged. The console wars. Or rather, the my gaming machine is better than yours wars, as let's face it, these battles were being waged long before the birth of the console. For myself, I unknowingly enlisted when I was aged around 10 or 11. I'd just become the proud owner of a Spectrum Plus. Yup, the dream machine with the plastic keys were once they were rubber. Proper cutting edge. Daley Thompson is not taking this beast down. Meanwhile, my best friend had acquired an Amstrad. The fool. Little did we know, but we were now fresh-faced rookie troops in the battle for video game supremacy. Us Specky owners were of course the good guys in the conflict, the Han Solos and Luke Skywalkers, facing off against the evil Darth Vaders, Jabba the Hutts and Alan Sugars. Rather than scrapping it out across the lush green landscape of the distant planet of Endor, which was totally make-believe anyway, we were more inclined to engage in arguing in bedrooms and playgrounds up and down the country. It was pre-internet, so we went toe-to-toe like the true adolescent warriors we were. Now, my best mate, let's call him Paul because that was his name, and myself were no strangers to a good old argument. It was what best buds did. Our topics were nicely wide-ranging too. Liverpool v Man United was occasionally the theme, and I'll never, ever forget the Sabutio riots of '85, where 7 players required immediate superglue attention. The floodlights went over, and our mums got mightily upset. But even all that carnage paled into insignificance when side by side with the absolute aggression we'd reach when defending our gaming machine of choice. We felt time and time again, blood brothers since nursery separated by who had the best version of Rambo the video game. And it turns out, neither of us did. It was, and still is, quite remarkable the amount of venom one can spit when defending a piece of plastic that has been elevated to godlike status in its owner's eyes. I was guilty of it during my Spectrum days, and it continued into what became the console wars proper. Mega Drive versus Super Nintendo, Saturn versus PlayStation, and on it went. Pity the poor guy who had the Atari Jaguar, a machine that managed to enter the fray virtually unarmed, yet that same poor owner would have still tried their utmost to convince anyone who would listen that it was the pinnacle of gaming. Probably until they believed it themselves. It was just what we did. This unwavering backing of one console above all others is something that still goes on today. I myself have finally moved away from it. I now embrace every gaming platform as an opportunity for further adventures in pixel land. But I do sometimes wonder why I was so anti every other console bar whatever I owned. After some thought, and not peer-reviewed research, I believe it boils down to fear. What the Spectrum, and I guess the VIC-20 before it, that was my first home machine, delivered, was something that excited me. Video games moved from the traditional arcade into the cosy living room. This was a new dawn. As a kid, this was Christmas every day. In the early days, the fights between friends regarding Spectrum and Commodore and Amstrad, and even Dragon, we all had that one friend, were no different from the arguments over football teams and superheroes. We all had our favourites, and they were best no matter what logical arguments came our way. But as I grew older, my viewpoint shifted, and it was shaped by the untimely demise of various machines. I remember watching in awe one distant morning at breakfast TV. The presenters were getting to grips with a golf game on a new machine called the 3DO. It looked incredible. That was the game. The machine looked a bit rubbish, but I immediately wanted one. This had to be the future. And then 3DO died a death, leaving its adopters lost in a stormy sea of terrible games with no paddles and no land in sight. Next, on much loved and always missed evening TV show Games Master, Dominic Diamond unveiled the Aliens vs Predator game for Atari Jaguar. Yep, that Atari Jaguar machine again. It looked incredible and true to form. I wanted one. I was a kid. Then the Jaguar 2 died a death, this time crushed under the weight of Sega, Sony and its own incredibly poor games catalogue. I had luckily avoided both machines, but given the chance, aka the funds, I would have snapped them up in a heartbeat, opening myself up later to the heartbreak of my console becoming redundant for the company and the cord being cut, leaving the Jaguar, the 3DO and all those who had invested heavily feeling a little bit ripped off. Then it finally happened to me. I invested in the Sega Dreamcast, a great machine, fantastic games and a dazzlingly bright future, until a mere 3 months after I picked up the machine, Sega rang time on the console, declaring there would be no new games coming out for it. I was gutted, but it hammered home for the first time the reason Paul and myself would happily go to war for their console of choice, because deep down, we were terrified that it would flop, and we'd be left on the gaming sidelines with a machine that had lost its mojo, its audience, and its gaming future. I fought my case for the Xbox against PlayStation owners long and fierce, purely because the thought of Microsoft pulling the plug early made my blood run cold. It now felt like a genuine possibility. I'd been there with the much missed Dreamcast, and it was not a place I wanted to return. When video games play a big role in your life, or when they have been a big part of your past, it's easy to worry about losing it. And I think I understand that in myself now. To take my video games away as a kid would have hurt. To have the machine fail like the 3DO or the Jaguar or the Dreamcast, for the player who's invested so much time and love into the platform, is a huge blow to take. And so, on the back of that fear, we march into the battlegrounds of the console wars without realising we're actually all on the same side, fighting for the same goal. The side of video games themselves and their continued place in homes across the globe, because without them, the world would be a much duller place. And we'd all have to watch Coronation Street. Oh, and Paul, if you ever hear this, Rambo on the Spectrum was infinitely better than it was on the Amstrad, even though it wasn't very good. Thank you for listening to the first Desert Island Gamer Campfire Tales. Until next time, good night.